Hello everyone, welcome to the featured webinar conducted by Informatica. Today's webinar is on cloud data warehouse migration of PowerCenter customers. The presenter for this session is Ron Lunason, an Informatica veteran from the product management team managing the partner ecosystem solution architectures with more than 20 years of experience at Informatica, including PowerCenter and IICS. Before we get started, here are some housekeeping tips. The webinar is for 1 hour, including the Q&A session. There will be a webcast for 30 to 45 minutes, and then your questions will be answered live at the end of the presentation. All dial-in participants will be muted to enable the speakers present without interruption. Your questions can be submitted through the Q&A section and we'll be addressing them to the end of the presentation. The webinar will be recorded and will be available in the Informatica Support YouTube channel and the Success Portal. The link will be emailed to you as well. Please set aside some time to complete the post-webinar survey and provide your feedback and suggestions for upcoming topics. This webinar is conducted by Informatica Success Portal. The Informatica Success Portal is a microlearning platform that offers free and unlimited learning to all the registered users. The Success Portal lists your success offerings, your customer success manager information, bookings available in the Ask an Expert session, and customized recommendation and content. Our new intelligent virtual assistant Diana is available in the Success Portal for all our cloud customers. I will hand over the rest of the presentation to Ron for continuing the presentation.
Thank you. Hello everyone. Again, my name is Ron Lunason. I'm the Senior Director for Strategic Ecosystems and Solution Architecture here at Informatica. And it's my pleasure to be your speaker today on today's webinar for Cloud Data Warehouse Migration for PowerCenter customers. Now for this webinar, I'll be spending some time going into some of the primary use cases that we're seeing as customers are going down the Cloud Data Warehouse Migration path. We'll also go over some high-level reference architectures on how customers are going through those use cases. I'll also be doing a quick demo at the end to show some of the ways that we can help you accelerate or get started on your path towards a data warehouse migration. And then we'll go ahead and open things up for open Q&A. Now, as we look at the different use cases for customers that are going down this journey towards cloud data warehouses and data lakes, typically we see 4 different examples of that. The first use case is around a simple lift and shift of the data warehouse up into the cloud. Now, this is typically being caused by the case that you may have where you're looking to just decommission some of your data centers. So in those cases, some customers are taking kind of an infrastructure as a service or a virtualization approach in the cloud where they're basically just trying to do this as simple as possible. They've got their on-premise infrastructure, and they're again just taking essentially a virtualized approach and running everything exactly as is up into the cloud. So as technology examples, we're seeing some customers going and taking their Teradata instances, running that up into the cloud, or potentially using Oracle Exadata and using Oracle's cloud to do that. For this webinar, we're actually not going to spend time talking about this particular use case. Instead, we're going to talk about the next 3. The first use case that we'll talk about is for net new cloud data warehouses. And from a technology standpoint, that's where you might have a new project and customers are just simply starting from scratch using something like Amazon Redshift, Snowflake, or Microsoft Azure Synapse Analytics. We're also seeing customers, and this probably most of you on this webinar are going through this piece, which is where you're looking to migrate an existing data warehouse up into the cloud. So you may have something, let's say like a Netezza that you're moving up into Redshift, or you're taking an Oracle Exadata and instead of taking a lift and shift approach, you're looking to go ahead and modernize and move that up into Microsoft Azure Synapse Analytics, perhaps. Oftentimes what we're seeing, though, is as customers are going down the cloud data warehouse migration path, oftentimes they are going also down the cloud data lake modernization path. So if you're going to go ahead and modernize your analytics, might as well do that end-to-end, including the data lake. So if you have an on-premise installation of Cloudera, and maybe you want to look to move that up into Azure Data Lake. Or if you've got maybe MapR, you want to move that up into S3 and Amazon. Or even if you're using something like Databricks, which does have some cloud native capabilities already, but looking to modernize even further with, let's say, Databricks Delta Lake. So these are really the three use cases that we're going to dive into in more detail here in this webinar. So let's first start off with the new cloud data warehouses. Now, oftentimes we're seeing customers choose this use case mostly because of scope reasons. So perhaps you may be a new company or a young company that maybe doesn't even have a data warehouse yet. So if you're going to go ahead and start by building one, might as well start in the cloud. But more often what we're seeing are some of the larger companies where there are perhaps departments or line of businesses that have pressing analytics needs today. They don't want to go to the existing on-premises data warehouse and want to do everything from the cloud from scratch. And oftentimes they're doing that because they want to take advantage of the goals of agility and time to value, which are things that the cloud provides. You can just simply go to one of the cloud providers, sign up for a subscription, and you can get going that day if you wanted to on a net new cloud data warehouse project. So a lot of advantages and reasons why customers are going down that path. Now, however, what we're also seeing as customers are doing that, what we're actually seeing is a lot of the challenges that people were encountering even in, let's say, the late 90s when people were implementing kind of standalone data marts on their own without taking a global or an enterprise view, they're running into those same exact challenges today. Many times what customers are doing is they're either taking, maybe let's say, let's just kind of hack this together, hire a Python programmer to do that, or maybe they're using some of the more departmental level tools that are actually coding centric. And what they start to find over time is that, as many of you have already seen, is hand coding is hard. It's actually very difficult to maintain. If you take that type of an approach, it can also be quite difficult to bring in different kinds of data sources, whether they're in the cloud or potentially even on premises. Getting data in with kind of these types of approaches can be quite hard. And then also what ends up happening is there is this focus towards agility, but people aren't taking, again, this longer view, and they're not taking care of things like data quality. And what ends up happening is, again, you've got some inconsistent reporting, even though you've got maybe one team got up and running really quick and another team was able to get running as well. They didn't coordinate on things like codes or values for different categories and so forth. So you end up with very poor data quality, and it makes it difficult to actually be able to scale that out from an enterprise standpoint. Now, when customers are going down this path, we often see that they're following a reference architecture at a high level that looks something like this, where they may use something, let's say, like Informatica's Enterprise Data Catalog to figure out, what's all this data that I need to actually hydrate into my cloud data warehouse. But oftentimes what we're seeing is instead of going ahead and going directly into the data warehouse, they may be actually putting data into a landing zone first, then going off, moving the data into the data warehouse, and then going and presenting the data to the end users through self-service business intelligence. Now, oftentimes what we're seeing is customers are taking that landing zone approach instead of going off and creating staging areas within a data warehouse like they would do kind of in the on-premises world. And a lot of times they're doing this because of the fact that storage is cheap in the cloud. So customers are just going off, grabbing a whole bunch of data that they may or may not need, putting the data into the landing zone, and at that point they're just able to then use that as kind of the place to hydrate their data into the data warehouse. So this is a fairly typical type of a reference architecture that we're seeing customers take with this use case. Now the next use case that we're going to talk about is cloud data warehouse migration. And I think many of you here on this webinar are kind of falling into this path where you have a cloud-first strategy now going forward. You're no longer looking to continue your investments in the on-premises data warehouses, where you want to go ahead and start to use the new cloud data warehouses, start to adjust your existing analytics to point to the new cloud data warehouses, as well as have your integration now point to the new CDW, or Cloud Data Warehouse. As far as goals go, again, I think everybody wants to get away from, if you've had bad data in the old data warehouse, you really want to clean that up. So don't propagate the old issues, especially around quality. Don't move them into the new data warehouse. And then also, as part of the goals that you want to undertake as part of this migration, is you want to get going on the new data warehouse so you can start to use some of the new innovations that these data warehouses provide and be able to give that type of flexibility and those benefits to your end users as quickly as possible. Now, as far as the challenges go as customers are going down this use case path, is oftentimes people have these data warehouses have been around for a very long time. You may have hundreds, but more than likely actually thousands of tables and ETL mappings and so forth that are out there. So it's very difficult to figure out, how do I get started? How do I prioritize the way that I'm going to move forward with the new cloud data warehouse? And oftentimes as you're going through this process, there's this perception or this feeling that I might not be able to leverage some of the work that we had in the old data warehouse into the new one. And they feel like they must rebuild everything from scratch. So I think that's a challenge that some people perceive that's actually there. And if you had bad data quality before, unless you do something about it, your data quality is still going to be bad in the new data warehouse. So really, again, taking a proactive approach and implementing something that's net new than your existing processes that you already have in place is part of the challenges that you have as you're migrating to the cloud. Now, from a reference architecture standpoint, you'll see something that's similar to this, where again, a lot of customers are using the Informatica Enterprise Data Catalog to help with that first challenge that I talked about. You've got all these mappings, you've got all these tables. Let's figure out a section of the data warehouse, maybe it's just a handful of star schemas and all of the related mappings that are associated with that. Let's just move those and migrate those first. And oftentimes, actually, what we're seeing as customers are doing this migration from a best practices standpoint is to not look to just simply lift and shift and move everything that you've already got as is, but instead look to actually migrate just maybe, let's say, some of your important dimension tables or some of your reference data that you need. So start moving some of the core pieces, the building blocks, up into the cloud first, and then potentially even start ingesting new data so you can start taking on new workloads sooner rather than later. So we are seeing that type of incremental approach, that kind of agile approach to migration that's being undertaken today by many customers. And it's allowing them to see faster time to value as they're going through the migration. And then lastly, the last use case is around cloud data lake modernization. And this is again is where as customers are moving up into the cloud for their data warehousing, they're realizing like maybe I can take advantage of the cloud to actually go beyond traditional analytics and deal with some of the newer use cases around AI and ML and data science, providing better self-service analytics to the end users by giving them access to more raw data, not just with the data that's in the data warehouse, and potentially even being able to deal with things that are around the real-time scale rather than the standard type of batch analytics that customers may be used to today. Now, as part of the goals here is oftentimes with the data lake modernization, it's to go after new data sets that are quite large, very massive in scale. So the goal of moving to the cloud data lake is to also take advantage of some of the new processing engines to deal with that scale, and ideally even be able to do that in a serverless and elastic way so it's easier to manage over time. And then lastly, the goal here is to also deal with some of the newer sources, some unstructured sources, again, some real-time or streaming sources are areas that people want to tackle as they take on cloud data lake modernizations. Now the challenges here, one of the biggest challenges that we hear are that customers are saying, well, things are changing fast. Some of the basis for the cloud data lakes that people were using 2 years ago, they don't exist anymore. So understanding the new technology landscapes, how the ecosystems are evolving, just keeping up with that can be a big challenge. And then the other challenges here that are actually quite similar to the other challenges in the other use cases. How do you find the right data that you need? And then how do you actually, you can get started with prototyping, but how do you take a enterprise view, a long view to this to make sure that you have your data pipelines that are in a enterprise production type of a implementation so that you're able to scale this over time. Now from a high-level reference architecture, here's something that we typically see that customers are doing as they're going through this use case, where they have the data lake now fully running up into the cloud. And typically with the data lake, they've broken that up into different sections. You've got kind of the raw ingestion of your landing zone that's there, doing some level of transformation and processing so that people can explore some of the data and then have some of the data in more of an enterprise state where it can be used downstream in things like AI and ML types of use cases, self-service use cases. And then that enterprise data can oftentimes also used as that kind of new ODS or staging area that feeds the data warehouse, since there's already been some level of transformation and cleansing done on the data inside of the data lake. So this is a very common reference architecture that we see for those customers embarking down this use case path. Now, regardless of which of the use cases you may be going down, we do recommend taking an agile phased approach to that migration up into the cloud. And we've already spoken about using the data catalog. I think that's one of the key ways that you can really help get started, just really kind of understanding the different data assets that you have already in the cloud or that exists on the on-premise world. And it can really help give you a roadmap on how you should be moving forward in this transition to the cloud. Now, oftentimes we're seeing a customer actually from a technology standpoint kind of take a mixed approach here. And a lot of this is going to be very dependent for each customer and based off of the circumstances that you may have. We are seeing some customers continue to use their existing PowerCenter investment and are going ahead and using that as they start the journey into the cloud. So instead of just loading into the existing on-premises on enterprise data warehouse, use that to go ahead and load the data up into the cloud data warehouse as well. On the flip side, we're seeing customers are just taking a full modern approach and are just going all in with the Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services and the various cloud capabilities that we have. But oftentimes what we're actually seeing is that there is a combination of both, where customers are using some combination of both the PowerCenter technology as well as some of the cloud technologies going forward to go ahead and do this migration up into the cloud. And one of the things that we're definitely looking to do here is to share some of these best practices with you, regardless of which use case you're taking or which form of the agile phase migration approach you want to take. We are working extensively with a number of customers around this. So if you want to get into more of the details where we can sit down with you and be a little bit more prescriptive around which approach to take, please email us at icare@informatica.com and we can set up some further follow-up to go through some of these details with you. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go into a demo, and what I'll be showing you quickly here is how you can use the Enterprise Data Catalog to get started with your journey up into the cloud for data warehousing. All right, so what I've got up on the screen now is the Enterprise Data Catalog. Let me go ahead and log in. And for those of you that may not have seen this before, what we provide is a Google-like search on top of all of your data assets that you may have within the enterprise, whether it's on premises or in the cloud. And what I can do is simply let's say I want to load customer data into the data warehouse in the cloud. And you see first off that this is a semantic search. So by typing it in, we actually are also making suggestions on what's out there. But if I do a search on customer, we see a bunch of the results that are related, anything related to customer. What you also see here is on the left, we have a bunch of different facets that allow you to kind of really focus in on the specific data that you're looking for. Now for me, in this case, I want to grab data from the existing data warehouse that's sitting in Microsoft SQL Server. So let's go ahead and just focus on that. And let me only focus on the data that has been tagged as very high quality or has a really high star rating. So by doing that, we see that for the customer search, there really is just one table, and this is actually the table I'm looking for, that is in the existing data warehouse that I'm looking to potentially move up into the cloud. So I can drill into that. And before I make that move into the cloud, it can get some further information and detail around, okay, what exactly is in this table? So here you see a high-level overview of some of the different traits for the table. You can also get very specific into the column level of this table, where you see the different field details, number of null distinct values, the actual data types as well as inferred data types that are there. And you also see that we have something that we call data domains. Now, data domains are different types of categories that either you can create on your own, and we also have a bunch of out-of-the-box data domains like currency, where we're automatically looking and tagging the different elements within your enterprise so that you can kind of bucket together the key data elements within the enterprise. So if I wanted to, let's say, grab all the different information around customer POs and load that up into the data warehouse, with the data domains, you could actually just do a search for customer PO and you'd see all the relevant data show up. Now also, one of the important things that you need to do as you're looking to migrate from on-premises up into the cloud is to better understand the lineage and impact for making that type of a move. So here in this view, what you see is both the upstream and downstream effect of if you were to move this table. So this table is being used by these reports up in Tableau, and it's receiving its data from these source systems. So, and you can also drill up and down and get even more details if you want to by going through these sliders. And I think one of the also very important things that you can do here is not only see the upstream and downstream impact from a kind of a BI and a table view, but you can also see that from your ETL transformation mapping logic as well. So here, by clicking on this icon, you'll see this orange dot. I can actually go in and see the different mapping rules that are related to this particular table. Now we can do this with the Informatica technologies, and we can also scan other third-party ETL tools as well. So you can get a full understanding of not just the table impact, but also the impact as it relates directly to your ETL logic. And then lastly, as you're going through a migration, we also do provide this relationship view where you can see from a graph representation standpoint, again, the different data domains that are contained within this table, the related tables. So this fact table has these 4 dimension tables that are associated with it. So I got to make sure I pull those into the data warehouse as well. So again, you get this nice, clean graph view of all the things that are related to that particular table. And again, this gives you a better understanding of what it's going to mean when you migrate this table up into the cloud. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and jump into the Q&A section. All right, great. So everyone, actually, before we get into the Q&A, we do have a couple of quick polling questions that we'd like to ask you guys. So go ahead and look at the first question here. And can we see that question? Let me see. Here we go. Okay, so the first question is, which of the following traditional data warehouses do you currently use? So all of you can just kind of let us know what you've been using over the last 5, 10, 15, in some cases 20 years. Please go ahead and select what you're using. This information is also going to be quite helpful for us as we continue to move forward. We are building out specific capabilities to help with the migration to the cloud. So again, if everybody could take the time to go ahead and do that. Okay. All right, let's take a look. Okay, not surprising. We do see with the results so far that 80+% are using Oracle for their data warehouse today on premises, followed by Microsoft, and then Teradata and Netezza with DB2 out there as well. So again, this is very good information here. So let's go ahead now and move on to the next question, which is around, well, which of the cloud data warehouses are you planning to use? And again, we are seeing that customers are looking at multiple options here. So if you are using or looking to use multiple cloud data warehouse technologies, please go ahead and select multiple choices if you can. Again, we've kind of listed out here some of the most popular cloud solutions. There are some others that are out there as well. So we should, if you are looking to use some of those, go ahead and click on the other button. Okay. And let's go ahead and go to the answers here. Okay, good, great. So it looks like people are looking at Microsoft Azure Synapse Analytics. So that looks like it's one of the more popular choices here, closely followed by AWS and Redshift, Snowflake, Google BigQuery, Teradata's cloud offering, Teradata Vantage is also here on the list. And again, as expected, we are also seeing a pretty good amount of other selections that are there. So thank you very much for this information. Okay, so now let's go ahead and take a look at Q&A questions. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A panel to go ahead and ask those. We do have one good question here that I'd like to go ahead and address. And the question is, how can vSAM / ISAM mainframe use cases handle during modernization use cases? So how are clients dealing with that, with moving up to cloud and data lakes, if you've got mainframes, mid-range sources, and so forth? So what we're actually seeing there, this is kind of one of those that is tailor-made for that combination approach when you're taking that agile migration. So we are seeing customers continue to leverage Informatica PowerCenter in that case, where they're going ahead and using that to connect directly to the mainframe. I think that's probably the safest way to do this. Connectivity to the mainframe, especially these days, can be difficult to manage if you're going to do that from a new solution. So that is, from time to value, best practices. Continue to use the investments in Informatica PowerCenter to do that. And then if you need to supplement that going forward, that's when you can use the Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services capabilities to potentially read from, let's say, a staging area that you're using to load into, or you can maybe use PowerCenter to load into, let's say, S3 or something, or ADLS Gen 2 or something along those lines. and then using Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services to further process the data going forward. So that's again, a fairly common thing that we're seeing if you're dealing with some of these kind of hardened sources that can be difficult to reconnect to from new applications. Okay, so I have another question here. So the question is, again, what was the email address if you wanted some additional follow-up? So the email address is icare@informatica.com. So ICARE, icare@informatica.com. If you send an email to that, we will reach out to you and we can get into the more specific details based specifically off of your environment, your use cases, and we can help guide you through what we would recommend to do going forward. Okay, looking at some of the other questions. So we have a question here. Do you have any plans of moving all PowerCenter customers onto the cloud? What was the time frame that we're looking for? So definitely want to be very clear about this. We are not looking to force PowerCenter customers to go to the cloud. We are actually expecting that going forward, that we are actually going to continue to have customers currently using and will continue to use PowerCenter going forward, especially again for things like the question that I just answered around the mainframe and mid-range. And again, there's certain sources and there's certain types of integrations that are being built and are being used with PowerCenter today that really should continue to be run there. Again, these are mission critical systems. These are hardened integration mappings that have been built over many years. So we by no means are saying that we are wanting you or need you to move those types of mappings up into the cloud. So again, if there are those cases that you need to supplement with the cloud capabilities, and then we do see that there likely are probably going to be some of those capabilities, we would recommend that you combine and have a combined approach. But by no means are we ever going to force customers to stop using PowerCenter. Okay, looking at a few. Okay, so one question is there a way that we can try some of the capabilities for the demo and just capabilities in general? So we do have, at least the cloud solutions are available for free 30-day trials. So if you go to informatica.com and in the upper right-hand corner of the page, there is a button for Informatica Cloud. So if you were to go and click on that, you can sign up for a free trial and see some of the integration capabilities that are available there. What we also have available is for some of the solutions like the Enterprise Data Catalog, that is available on most of the popular cloud ecosystem marketplaces. So you can go there and get essentially an easy way to get the Enterprise Data Catalog installed if you have a cloud subscription to one of the major providers. It's a quick and easy way to get the software that you need. Currently at this point though, the catalog is not available with a 30-day trial, but that is definitely something that you can work with your account teams on to get a closer look and potentially have a deeper understanding and maybe even a hands-on experience with the catalog. So if the catalog specifically is something that you're interested in, please reach out to your account team about that. Okay, there's a question here around, is there a specific version for PowerCenter that we need to communicate with the cloud? So generally speaking, I mean, there's different approaches to doing this. You can have more of a loosely coupled approach where you can do things like use PowerCenter to load into a common staging area, and then from there use cloud to move forward. And again, that's loosely coupled, so you don't actually have a direct tie-in together between PowerCenter and cloud. But for some of the other capabilities that we're doing for the actual direct communication between the two, there is some restrictions around versioning there. So generally speaking, Of course, best practice for us is, everything that we're doing from a new capability standpoint is going to be done with the latest version of PowerCenter. So that is something that we would recommend. There are some other areas there, though, so I think that's one where if you have a specific question, if you can reach out to icare@informatica.com, we can take a look at specifically what you're running and kind of talk through what the options are. I'm just looking through some of the other questions here. Okay, one question is around, is lift and shift of existing PowerCenter code from on-premise to CDW possible? So yes, that is something that's possible. We do have connectors for the most popular cloud data warehouses available for PowerCenter. So that is something that you can do, and we do have some advanced services that can help with that process specifically. And again, that's one where there's stuff that we're also doing that's work in progress. So if that's something that you're interested in, leveraging PowerCenter to move up into the cloud, or kind of point your mappings to point up into the cloud, that definitely, for that case, for sure, reach out to icare@informatica.com. But just one quick note about that. I think one of the things, if you're looking to take a combined approach with PowerCenter and using that to use it with a cloud data warehouse, there are certain things that we're seeing customers do, and I kind of highlighted a little bit of this in the use cases, where you may start off with a kind of a lift and shift traditional view of the things like your schema and the way that you're reporting against the data warehouse. You're keeping it the same, at least for the initial launch of your cloud data warehouse deployment. But what we see quickly is that customers want to fully optimize to take advantage of all the cloud capabilities that those data warehouses provide. Things like leveraging a cloud data lake as the back end for your staging/ODS area, so that you can actually share some of that information more broadly to other users. So that's one of those cases where oftentimes many customers are looking to leverage some of the cloud-specific capabilities that we have with Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services to supplement some of those mappings. Because in many of those cases, you actually end up having to rewrite some of the mappings. But the key here, and then again, this is where we can help you with this, is if we're able to actually leverage some of the PowerCenter logic, but then use that up into the cloud, that's something again that we're working on right now. We've got some advanced services around that, so we can have a discussion with you so we can drill into that in more detail. Okay. So a question came in around, we are positioning through some solution offerings with the different ecosystem partners on helping customers accelerate to move up into the cloud. Again, that's one where, regardless of which cloud you're using, this is a highly focused area for us, as you can imagine. So there's lots of different approaches, lots of different options. If you go to icare@informatica.com, we can help sort through a lot of those things with you individually. So definitely, please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you've got further questions about this. Okay, looking here at another question. Here's an interesting question. So how are on-premise B2B use cases, how are they getting modernized? Will application integration capabilities be replacing B2B in the new data modernization world? So I'll just at least give you my opinion on this. I personally do think that it will take some time, but I do think that a lot of the B2B use cases are going to be using more of an application integration/API approach when it comes to B2B use cases. But that is one where, those B2B use cases and the bands and the technologies that are used, again, those are things that have been around for a very long time, much like what you see with enterprise data warehousing. So this is something that I think people do need to take some time and care on. They do need to take a phased approach as they're going through this migration. In some cases, it may make sense to move fully over to that API-based world, and in some cases, it actually may not be the right move. But we do see that this trend is happening for B2B as well as data warehousing. And that is one where if you're using Informatica technologies for your B2B use cases on the on-premises world, we have taken very significant steps of taking some of those same technologies and enhancing it with cloud capabilities, and are making them available in the Informatica cloud platform. And again, for any of these things, again, we didn't want to be overly prescriptive here because every customer really is different. So we did want to use this webinar as an opportunity to reach out to you, and if you have questions about this specifically, icare@informatica.com, and we can go through those details and really prescribe what's best for you. Okay, it looks like we've got one last question here. Do you have a list of use cases that should be moved to IICS, Informatica Intelligent Cloud Services, versus PowerCenter? That's a very common question that we get all the time. It's also a very loaded question because, I hate this answer, but I'm going to give it anyway. It really does depend. There again, I think there are some clear-cut areas where, again, mainframe, you've got certain things that are very hardened on the PowerCenter side. We are by no means saying to take those things. We have to be very careful with them, and those may not move. They may need to stay. And then there are certain use cases that are clear-cut as well, where you may have things like you are moving over and you want to add that data lake as your new staging area / ODS. And you want it to contain data from not just standard relational and structured data, but you want to grab from all these new data sources that you're being asked to perform analytics on. And in those cases, we have technology that was built in the cloud specifically for that. So like, for instance, we have a mass ingestion capability in the cloud that can move at scale large amounts of data, whether it's from flat files, whether it's from relational sources, whether it's streaming, and load it directly into the cloud data lakes. And you can do that very, very quickly and easily. So again, you can say, grab this folder, grab these 1,000 files, and move them over on a regular basis as these files change. And you can do that just through a 4-step wizard. Versus if you were to do that via PowerCenter, you can use parameterization to simplify some of this, but in many cases you are dealing with many, many mappings to deal with this, and if things change, again, you have to go through the process of kind of rebuilding, refreshing the mappings, and so forth. So that is definitely one of those areas that is, again, fairly clear-cut. We've got capabilities purpose-built for those use cases built in the cloud. So again, that may be one area where you want to start supplementing what you have with PowerCenter with IICS. Now, unfortunately, again, there's a lot of stuff in between. Just one of the things that I did want to call out here is that we do realize that the use case patterns, things around things like slowly changing dimensions, again, the underlying ODS staging areas are moving. So there are different mechanisms and best practices to deal with things like push-down optimization, where if you want to run your mapping and run it as SQL in the cloud data warehouse, or again, maybe you're building mappings because now everything's in a data lake instead of an ODS, you may want to start leveraging Spark technology instead to move it from raw staging to your quote-unquote ODS, and that's being loaded then into your star schemas. So those are cases that we are looking to build newer technology to deal with those use cases exclusively in the cloud. So, I think if you do want to fully take advantage of what the cloud provides, there are going to be some of those cases where you may want to start using IICS instead of PowerCenter to deal with those. Okay. So we got one last question that just came in. So the question is specifically around PowerCenter connectivity to some of the cloud data sources and what versions are required. I actually don't know the answer off the top of my head here, so this is something that we'll reach back out to you, or again, feel free to shoot us an email on this as well. But we have your question and your contact information, so we'll reach back out to you with the answer to that question specifically. All right, I think that's all of the questions that we have. Thank you very much for all of those great questions. This is actually really kind of what we were hoping for here, was to kind of lay down a foundation with the slides and the demo that we have, and to really kind of have some of these detailed conversations in the Q&A. So thank you very much for these. I know that many of you probably have a lot more questions that are very specific to your use cases. So I know that I've repeated this over and over again, but I'll say it one more time. If this is a topic that you want us to go into more detail with you and to look at your environment specifically, please reach out to icare@informatica.com, and we can spend further time to go through that. All right, so Tanya, I think that's what we've got here. It looks like no more questions have come in. So everyone, thank you very much for attending. Thank you for the questions, and we'll talk to you all again soon. Thank you.